Today I want to give an update on my new learning system, Skill Builder, and also briefly explain a concept for business people that is extremely difficult to understand, but actually one of the most interesting things for those actually developing software, which is algorithm design. I've met with about 5 to 10 new experts in different fields this week, and I'm getting huge interest with more than 5 people already underway in creating their lessons. It's getting really exciting, and even more so when I see the excitement in the other person's face each time. This site, I think, requires the most intricate and specific engineering I've had to do, more so than the 25 other projects I've done previously. So I'm going to take this opportunity to explain algorithms a little bit. Coding represents about 10% of the software development process. It's basically knowing a programming language and its syntax and how to use it, like English or any other language. I first started learning this about 19 years ago in high school. Coding is not the hard part, and people think that the number of lines of code is what matters. But code is actually a means of implementing algorithms, programming logic, and conditions. In fact, the more intelligently designed the algorithm is, the conditions, the programming logic, many times this will result in less lines of code. The algorithms and the programming is also the part that really differentiates skill level of the individual creating it. Imagine you have a process that takes 1 second to execute when done in one algorithm, one way, but when done in a different way, a different algorithm, it takes half a second. It might not seem like a big deal, but when that process has to execute 1,000 times per day, that actually comes to an extra 8.3 extra minutes to accomplish the same thing every day. What if that process has to execute 1 million times per day? Well, that would actually come out to about 347 hours per day, which is obviously impossible. So putting aside extra processing power and multiple cores working simultaneously, that means that unless you have an engineer that can figure out a way to shorten the execution time, your system could not provide a solution in the real world to solve real business needs. As an example, if you could find an engineer that could design that algorithm to take 1/100th of a second instead of 1 second, which is massive, then it would take approximately 7 hours per day to run through it 1 million times. I'd say that algorithm design falls into two categories: creating one and improving one. Creating an algorithm that even works and does what is needed, this can sometimes take weeks, months, or even years to think of how to do and how to then design it and then create it, all depending on the complexity. And two, improving one, changing or improving an existing algorithm to make it more simple and execute more quickly. In some cases, this can be easier. In some cases, it can be much harder, especially when the existing version is already well designed. So now let me put it in context to see how complex Skill Builder is to design. When I was CTO for 4 years of a property management app, I created a programming test to filter out developers before hiring them. It took more than 10 hours to get through, and 8 out of 10 didn't even make it through. Two of them did: a 45-year-old with 20 years of programming experience and a 22-year-old student. The student made it through in about 12 hours, and the 45-year-old got through in about 25 hours. I hired the 22-year-old as my lead developer. A few years in, we were working on a feature in the app that had many conditions, about 6 to 8 degrees of conditions. If this, then this. Anyone who's ever done them before knows that every time you have to nest them, meaning creating one within another, it multiplies the level of complexity. It doesn't just add to it. So 6 degrees means if this, and 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 then handling all of the conditions and all the else's of each one of them at every single level. He spent about 2 to 3 weeks trying to design it and get it working, but he must have been missing certain conditions, or some of them might have been wrong. This is extremely common thing, especially for something complex, and it's incredibly difficult to account for every possible condition. So at this point, I stepped in. I spent about 3 hours designing it, reviewed it with him for about an hour, and then had him implement it, and it worked about a day or so later. Now, I'm not saying this to toot my own horn, because guaranteed there are better engineers than me out there, but I'm saying it to put into context the complexity of Skill Builder. There are many parts complex enough that I've had to just stare at the screen and just think for hours straight. Yesterday, for about 5 hours, I was just thinking how to do something really complex, a certain algorithm, without typing a single thing for 5 hours. It's looking like I'll be ready to release the next portion this coming week where users can actually go through a lesson and learn. And all that to say that things are going really well with Skill Builder, and I hope this gave a few insights into algorithm design. Thanks.